building urgency and building credibility that might not necessarily be there yet, kind of just growing into it. So we have some some bullet points we kind of wanted to go through, give you guys an idea, and again, we don't, we're kind of not familiar with everybody is in the process, and we feel like calling everybody out to figure it out. So we'll just assume that hopefully we'll provide a little value here. But when we're talking about like marketing and in the early stages, right, of your company, and even as you go along, like especially if you're not well funded yet, or you're getting there, or you're trying to like really bootstrap your business. Obviously, I know this goes without saying, but I'll write it anyway. Thinking strategically is kind of key to that effort. Why? Because corporations and enterprises, they have a lot more red tape. They got a lot of hoops they got to jump through. Certainly as your company gets bigger, you'll deal with the same kind of stuff, different legal liabilities and all kinds of things. I'll give you a quick example, like handing out, solicitations on campus, right? Like every university has a solicitation law, and so like Coca-Cola isn't going to come on campus and hand out solicitations because they can't. Right? They can't take that liability because the university would actually persecute that. I can do it all day long. I call and I've had that call before, and it's like, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. We fall under the radar so much, so it's not even worth. And to be honest, I think the worst fine. I've gotten one fine in 13 years. I should say that. It wasn't the university. It was like an apartment complex, and it was a $125 fine, and I was like. I thought to myself as I was calculating like how many customers we received from this drop that we did in this apartment complex, and I was like, I would pay that fine all day long. If I could like openly just keep doing this. So we did openly do that. And I actually haven't gotten fined again, believe it or not. So, but if we're going to be like more technical, the first thing more than anything when you're putting together like your marketing strategy, your customer acquisition strategy, is defining what your value proposition is, right? Like really understanding what your product is and what you're offering, and making sure that that's kind of created inside of your message, and then setting goals. So a lot of times we just, and what's important to remember is we don't want to waste so much time on we don't want to waste a lot of time on this. At the end of the day, this early on, like all of your time should be built around customer acquisition, right? Like the more time you can spend actually acquiring customers, the better. And less time on these things, but you do want to have like a firm grip on, what is our value proposition, obviously, to the user, right? The value proposition to like investors is a little bit different, a lot different actually, than the value proposition to the user. So you want to try to craft the right kind of message depending on who you're targeting. And setting goals for yourself, like setting goals helps force you to like figure out and learn what the demographics are, how many people are you targeting, like for example, if I'm just going to use a college campus example a lot, obviously, but if I'm going to an apartment complex to promote, because I want to drive customers from that area, maybe we did a plot of all of our customers in the city that we're in, and we saw that like the northeast sector of the city, we get like no orders from there, so we started targeting, areas in that part of the city that we might be able to get our message out to drive more customers. We might see like this apartment complex seems like a good idea, but when we do the research, there's only 32 rooms, and they're only doubles, so we're only dealing with 64 people total that we could possibly get out. And like, what's the cost effectiveness of going to an apartment complex that only has a maximum of 64 tenants that we can get to? And if we look at like other examples where we went to bigger apartment complexes and look at the ratios and stuff, we might decide like, we're going to spend $500 when we get 6 customers out of here, and that falls way below our typical customer acquisition costs. And decide, hey, this money's going to be better spent on Google AdWords or whatever it might be. So the idea there, though, is that when we're setting goals on how many customers we want to get out of certain things, it forces us to think about what are the actual demographics. And a lot of times we jump into customer acquisition and don't really think through specifically like how we want to, what kind of goals we want to pull out of that. So obviously planning our activities, plan the activities, understand how much money you're spending. My handwriting's So as you get lower, you just want to be able to read it. Anyway, but yeah, this this goes into like obviously budgets, which none of us ever have, right? We never have the money we want to spend. So again, planning is critical because the more you plan, the less you're going to deal with stuff that comes up that you were unexpected. Like for example, I'll give you a great example. Like we obviously do a lot of flyering and that kind of stuff on college campus, and for years we printed from like local shops. And then we started dabbling in like online printing, and we found a company in California that, just shatters everyone, right? And when I hear people like use local print shops now, it's like cringing to me because the cost difference is so great. The problem is that there is a time difference, right? There's a turnaround time. Like it's a minimum of like, even if we do a rush order, I think it takes like 4 or 5 days for us to get those products, right? Now some kind of unique opportunity comes up, like a basketball game or it's a big rivalry game that we didn't know was going to happen, and we're slow in our timing and our processing, our planning, we end up getting stuck having to go to the local shop to print stuff, or being forced to use certain resources that we know are more expensive than what we normally get, and that sucks. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's our fault because we didn't plan properly, right? And those costs accumulate over time, and what it does is it drives up the customer acquisition cost, which ultimately affects your investment debt, right? Because it drives up everything. So the better you are planning everything and budgeting, the more you can avoid those circumstances. And then obviously setting up yourself to be able to evaluate. Now, hopefully I'm spelling these words correctly, so that's really interesting. But you want to be able to evaluate your effectiveness, after the fact. So when you're doing your marketing, making sure that you are kind of keeping the message, targeted towards the area, so you can track your effectiveness after the fact. And again, that speaks to customer acquisition costs and speaks to